Coming up on the NESN Bruins podcast, it's the 2019-2020 season preview. We preview the Boston Bruins and see whether they can return to the Stanley Cup final and avenge last season's loss, while we also zip around the league and make our predictions for the upcoming season. Hey everyone, welcome into the NESN Bruins podcast. I'm NESN.com's Mike Cole, joined as always by NESN.com's Logan Mullen for this week's weekly episode that also happens to be our season preview episode, Logan.
How about that? Happy to be here. It's weird. It's October 2nd.
It is October 2nd. The Bruins begin their season a day from today, so by the time this gets up, it'll be even closer to the 2019-20 season commencing. For the defending Eastern Conference champions, the season actually starts Wednesday night. The Blues are home, right? I'm guessing.
Blues are at home, yeah.
So they will raise the banner and do all of that against the previous Stanley Cup champion Washington Capitals. But for better or worse, hockey season is back. It feels like we were just hitting up the beaches and drinking our iced coffees and doing all the things that you do in the summers.
Cottages.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Cottaging across North America. But we're back. Hockey season is upon us. I assume you're more excited than I am.
Yeah, that tends to be the case, right? I like hockey.
Hockey's a tough hang in the early fall for me, though. There's just a lot going on. I get caught up with football, baseball playoffs. There's a lot going on. It's good and bad,
Yeah, it's tough for you to focus. So,
but I'm more of an AHL guy too.
That's true.
Discussed.
Yeah,
we can get into that a little bit later. If anyone wants to
hear about our Chuck and Larry moment.
Shell TV subscription. So this will be, for most of the season, will be a Bruins/NHL podcast. But hey, if I want to talk about the Springfield Thunderbirds, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, no, far be it from me to stop you.
Exactly. So, all right, before we really dive into the upcoming season for the Bruins and the NHL at a whole, we will eventually do some predictions, some zany stuff like that, the usual preseason preview accoutrements,
all sorts of hijinks.
Yes. Yeah. Before we look ahead, we must look back. You went to Bruins Media Day earlier this week.
I did,
which is always a banging affair. It's so much not you know what I mean. Should have been an apostrophe there as opposed to a hard G at the end. Banging affair. It's a good time had by all. What were your big takeaways from Bruins Media Day, if any? I mean, at this point, it's just press conferences, them talking about how they blew it last year.
Yeah, I was actually kind of shocked. I mean, they obviously had to face those questions, but I don't think it ended up being a major point of emphasis. I kind of hope that ends up being the case, because they all sound pretty over it to the degree that they can. Like, I think most of them acknowledge that it'll always suck, obviously, but I don't think any of them are losing sleep over it anymore. Big takeaways, there really weren't a ton. Big things for me was some of the injury stuff. I wrote about this for NESN.com about long-term IR. Don Sweeney was asked if he plans on putting anyone there. He outright said yes.
Did you ask him just, how does this work?
No. I did a little
reading. Just explain it for me real quick?
I had an idea of how it worked already. I did a little bit more research and then tried to articulate it into a story.
It should be noticed that a lot of your research was asking me.
Yeah, I mean, conversing with you, exchanging,
I think I pointed
double checking.
Okay, sure.
No, you helped me with injured reserve because I was getting a little confused last week. Long-term IR, I for some reason had figured out a little bit better.
Takeaways from LTIR.
Takeaways from LTIR. I think it's almost certain John Moore ends up on it. Kevin Miller also could. For me, and this is kind of reading between the lines, if a guy gets put on long-term IR, he has to be out a minimum of 10 NHL games / 24 days. I think 10 games for the Bruins is 22 days, so he would have to be out a little bit longer. It would be a few Saturdays from now.
Yeah.
Is the absolute earliest that they could come back. Kevin Miller's resumed skating. If only Moore ends up on long-term IR, that would seem to indicate to me that Kevin Miller could be back before the month is over. I don't know if I'm reading into that too much, but that was kind of my takeaway from that. Now, with long-term IR, I just outlined the stipulations for when a guy can come back. A lot of teams will try and use it to kind of finesse some salary cap benefits. That's why today, I think it was Connor Clifton and Carson Coleman were loaned to the Providence Bruins technically. Vakanainen was called up. It's so that you can get as close to the salary cap limit as possible. So when you put a guy on long-term IR, it helps clear some of that space.
Paper transaction.
Yeah, it is a textbook paper transaction. Connor Clifton and Carson Coleman will both start the year with the Boston Bruins. But some teams, I guess there's a perception out there that teams will use long-term IR so that they can fly over the cap, because if a guy is on long-term IR, you technically can operate above the limit. But basically all that does is kick the can down the road from having to shed cash at a later point. Long and short of it, expect someone to be there. I expect it would be John Moore. If Kevin Miller's on it, that goes to show he still has more time and or they're continuing to take it slow. If he doesn't, that would seem to indicate to me that he could be back before the end of the month. They haven't given a timetable on him, so you have no clue what the situation really is. But nevertheless, that was one of the big injury points, and then the other being David Krejci, who's now a game-time decision for the season opener. I would suspect he plays. If he doesn't, I don't think he'll be out much longer. I don't think that's anything too serious.
Sounds like an exciting day if all the information coming out is just buttoning up a few short.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm missing anything.
No, I didn't think there was a whole lot there. I mean, they're returning the same exact team for the most part. I think that was probably a big talking point. I know that there was some stuff out there with Marchand talking about that. Like, we're just rolling this thing back. Like, there's not a whole lot to say. They've said all they could say about the Cup final. It's the same players, same situations for the most part. We've heard from all the principals in terms of Charlie McAvoy getting his contract and, Carlo and all of that. So I think we all know where everybody stands entering this season, and things are ready to go.
Yeah, so. I would venture to agree.
In terms of the injury stuff, I don't think that's a huge deal. I think you look at the D pairs that they have right now, I think they're going to be quite all right moving forward.
Yeah,
the depth is
they
nice
have plenty
to have.
Of depth.
One of these guys gets hurt, then you kind of have an issue, but you still have Kampfer waiting in the wings, Vakanainen, et cetera, et cetera.
Kampfer, and I've harped on this before, is a very important player because he's a nice stopgap, basically. So in the event that anyone goes down, you can rely on him to play however much you need him to. And there's decent, at least on the left side, there's decent depth in Providence too, between Zaboral, Vakanainen, Lozon. So I think they can afford to take their time with John Moore and Kevin Miller. But yeah, the depth there, the depth pretty much everywhere is fine. They're still up front. There are more question marks, I'd say, but nevertheless, I don't think they're really in much of a pinch.
Cool. All right, let's get into our formal preview of the 2019-20 Boston Bruins.
All right.
And let's make it quick, because I don't think there's a whole lot to really touch on that we haven't already touched on in the last couple months.
You know what we should do? We should just take last year's podcast and drop it in here and save ourselves like 30 minutes.
Or even a little bit of like midsummer recap from
our training camp one.
Yeah. There was not a whole lot that has changed.
No.
This contend for a division title. I think missing the playoffs would be borderline inexcusable. Given expectations, I don't think that would be the most shocking thing in the world, but this is a team that should fully expect to make the playoffs. I think it's a team that should expect to reach at least the second round, and I will say anything short of an Eastern Conference Finals bid would be disappointing.
Okay.
After that, it's all gravy. I think I've upped that maybe. I think last year I said if they win one series in the playoffs, that would be an accomplishment, a good season. I think getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals after going to the seventh game of the Stanley Cup Final would be a pretty impressive feat for a team this old. So I think that's where I stand right now.
I think expectations are high. I think it would be a disappointment if they didn't make it to the conference final. However, I think it would end up...
It's going to be hard.
And I believe it'll be a little bit more forgivable than we might otherwise assume, because of how deep they went last year.
Sure,
There's always that perception that, it's so tough to get deep into the postseason after that. So I think that there's a chance, actually, that it would be, to a degree, excused if they didn't make it that far.
All right,
that said, the talent, and I'm not trying to be dismissive.
I'm not going to bang the table.
But I think that there's enough depth in the Eastern Conference that they could make it to the second round and get bounced. They could get a tough draw in the first round and get bounced. I think gone are the days where getting a wild card and playing the Metro could be better. I mean, we were talking about that last year, how, it'd be kind of nice.
I still think that's a very realistic possibility. That would be maybe their best case scenario, depending on how the season plays out.
Yeah.
Like if Toronto and Tampa Bay are just absolute wagons, if you get that wild card and you have to go through the Metro, then I think that's probably
you
better.
Roll your dice. See, I would, and we can get into this later. I am of the belief that top to bottom, the Metro is a more consistently talented division, but there's way more star power and way more overall talent in the Atlantic.
Okay.
We kind of got off track.
No, and I think it's all related. So, we'll get into our. Do you want to do a Bruins prediction right now, or do you want to keep that as part of? We'll save that for when we get into
pocket that for now.
To the put a pin in it.
I've got a few.
So you want to do bold Bruins predictions?
Sure.
What do you have for a bold Bruins prediction?
For one, Carson Coleman becomes the long-term solution on the second line.
Wow, that would be huge.
Short of injuries, I think he ends up staying there. And for the first time since Jerome McGinley left, David Krejci will have stable line mates with Krejci, DeBrusk, and Coleman. Reason I say that, it's easy to get caught up in what he was able to do last year. Between the postseason and regular season, he only had 19 games of NHL experience, so you can still say he's a relative unknown. But for what he does, I think his game complements Krejci's and DeBrusk's better than any other option that they have. Mm-hmm. And reason being that he can still be a productive player when he doesn't score. I think that was the problem with a lot of guys that they cycled through there. Take Ryan Donato, for example, or Peter Cehlarik. When they were scoring, it was great. When they weren't, they gave you almost nothing. Coleman has a decent scoring touch. We saw a few times that he has a good shot when he uses it. But he's a 200-foot player, and he will hunt pucks well and be able to create opportunities for Krejci and DeBrusk. I think he's the only one of their options outside of maybe Coyle, if they elected to go that route, that can provide all of those things. But in moving Coyle up, then you're taking away from the bottom six, becomes a whole thing. I think he actually ends up becoming a useful second line right wing, and save for random circumstances impacted by injuries or whatever, he ends up staying there.
Fair enough. I like that. I think that would be a huge. I don't even know what the right
We're
term
trying to
is.
be bold here.
No, and I think that would be, that's a huge question for the Bruins during the season. So if you get that figured out, you're in a much better spot. For mine, I'm going to go one of them at least. David Pasternak, Hart Trophy finalist.
Oh, okay.
I think this is a season where he continues to, his point production has increased in each of the last 3 seasons, which is pretty impressive when you consider he only played 66 games last year. He was on a 100-point pace for the entire season. I also look at that the Bruins are due. They haven't had a Hart Trophy winner since 72 and Orr won it. They haven't had a top 3 finalist since Bork in 1990. Still plays on one of the best lines in hockey. I think, I was looking at it, 6 of the last 7, something like that. Hart Trophy winners have all been between age 25 and 27 or something. Mm-hmm. Pasternak's 23, so he's got that working against him in terms of history, but I think he has continued to show that he's capable of improving year over year. Mm-hmm. I think he takes a pretty giant leap forward and is actually better than Marchand this year.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a fair assessment. Last year, I'd be interested to see what he would have done had he played more than 66 games and not dealt with the injury that you could tell as the season went on seemed to at least be impacting him a little bit. I don't think that's too far-fetched or unreasonable or anything.
But would you say it's bold?
I'd say it's bold. Saying a guy outside of Connor McDavid is going to be a Hart Trophy finalist is...
Yeah, there's only 3 of them every year.
It's bold, yeah.
Do you have any other bold predictions?
Yeah, this one I've expressed to you before. I think the Bruins end up being a wild card this year. I think the top 3 in the Atlantic in some form or fashion ends up being the Lightning, the Leafs, and the Florida Panthers. And I think the Bruins end up being 4th in that equation. Okay. I don't think they'll have any issue getting into the postseason, but I do think that they might have a tough time getting back via a top 3 spot in the division.
All right. I will say the Bruins will make some sort of what we will consider blockbuster trade.
Ooh, okay.
At the deadline or near the deadline. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to happen, considering the salary cap situation.
Considering they have like $300,000 in cap space.
Maybe it involves Backus, which continues to be the can that we kick down the road.
Yeah.
But
we need to find a way to shoehorn that into every single podcast.
I know. Let me just look this up real quickly. I don't want to get this wrong, but the Bruins have, they have all of their 7 rounds of picks for the next 3 years, except for their 2020 4th-round pick. So they have just every pick at their disposal.
Capital.
At their disposal, yeah. I think they make some sort of move with a first-round pick. I know Sweeney doesn't like to do it, but the reality is that this team is getting older. I just want to run down the ages real quick of these guys. Maybe I had this somewhere. Bergeron's 34. Krejci's 33. Rask is turning 33. Marchand's turning 32. Chara, as everybody knows, 42. This is not going to last a whole lot longer as currently constituted.
No.
When we're doing the season preview next year, I don't think we'll be talking about we'll have the same conversation where this is the same roster. So I think, Sweeney at some point, it's great to go with the long-term look at things, but at a certain point you have to get a little more aggressive. I think maybe that happens this year and they try to push themselves over. I can't begin to tell you who it would be for, but it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I would argue that teams of late, and the example that springs to mind to me is Mark Stone trade this past season. Teams have become a little more amenable to making big deals at the deadline. Even on a smaller scale, I mean, you look at what the Blue Jackets did in getting Matt Duchene. That took a lot of wheeling and dealing with the Senators. So things like that, I can see that happening. And, I couldn't even venture a guess as to who that would be or who would be involved. But
cross that bridge when we get there.
Nevertheless.
Do you have any other?
No.
I only had 2. I actually just made one up on the fly. So.
It's as bold as I'm willing to get. Just see how far we can lead ourselves astray.
All right, let's talk about the NHL as a whole. I just want to point this out off the top. It's been 26 seasons now since a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup.
Which is nuts.
It sucks to be Canada. Interesting to point out, just once in the salary cap era has a team repeated as Stanley Cup champion. It was the 16 and 17 Pittsburgh Penguins. Also, the Penguins the only team in this decade to make back-to-back Cup final appearances, which doesn't bode well for the Bruins, or really even the Blues either. I thought this was interesting too. The Action Network, which is a sports betting information site, pointed out that 15 of the 31 teams in the NHL have Stanley Cup champion odds of 20 or 1 or shorter.
Really?
That's a lot. Half of the league has a pretty good shot of winning the Cup according to odds makers. And you just have to go back recently. The Blues were 30-1 to win the Stanley Cup when last season began. Washington was 11-1, Pittsburgh 11-1, Pittsburgh 13-1, Chicago 7-1, Kings 12-1, Chicago 12-1, Kings 16-1, Bruins 16-1. So that 2015 Blackhawks team in the midst of a dynasty, really the outlier. So that's a long way of saying the Stanley Cup champion could come out of nowhere this season, which kind of makes trying to have predictions a little more difficult, but we will do our best here. Let's start in the Eastern Conference of the Atlantic Division. Who do you see being the top 3 teams out of that division?
I alluded to it a few minutes ago. If I have to do a specific order, I'd say I'll get bold.
So who do you think's going to win
I think the Lightning will win it, followed by the Panthers, and then the Maple Leafs, and then the Bruins, and then probably the Canadiens. I'm not nearly as high on the Maple Leafs as I think other people are. I think we're going to find out just how dangerous of a game they're playing by tying up as much of their cap space as they are in 3 guys. I think that's a big risk, and I think they had some notable departures on the blue line. I mean, they had to move out Zaitsev in order to get a deal done. Now Jake Gardner's gone. So in the past few years, it's been some of their forwards disappearing in the postseason. That's killed them. But it's also been their defense not being great, right? So in my eyes, yes, getting Tyson Barrie is a nice move. Cody Ceci, I could take or leave. But they didn't get any better on the blue line, and they lost Nazem Kadri, too, in order to get Tyson Barrie. And in doing so, one of their strengths is how talented they were up the middle. They were a mess last year in the postseason when Nylander had to move over to the third line center when Kadri got suspended. I don't know what their approach is going to be there this year, but Kadri's not an insignificant part of the Maple Leafs' success for the last however long, 7, 8, 9 years, however long he's been in the league. So while I understand the hype surrounding them, and I think that they will be a legitimate cup contender, I don't think they're going to be the wagon everyone suspects they will.
I think that I don't think they're going to win the Stanley Cup, but I think they're going to have a very good regular season because that's just so much top-end talent that you're going to just truck teams by virtue of being the much better team on the ice. So I have Tampa Bay winning the division as well, pretty much going away again. I think they're going to be a wagon for another year. Toronto and Boston in the Atlantic, it's pretty chalk. And I have the Panthers as one of my wild cards out of the Atlantic Division as well. So what about the Metro?
So the Metro, in my estimation, every single team in the Metro could, now then obviously not every single team can make the postseason, but every single team has the talent and the ability to make the postseason. If you go back to last year, which I'm trying to do right now because I don't have this all off the top of my head, between the Rangers, the Devils, and Rangers, Devils, Flyers, the three teams that missed the playoffs, they all got better this offseason. In terms of the Rangers, I think they got much better. In terms of the Devils, I think they got quite a bit better. Maybe not, they didn't necessarily go through the accelerated rebuild that the Rangers did.
Right.
But there are 8 teams there that I think conceivably could get playoff spots. A lot of people, you included, think the Blue Jackets are going to fall off. I'm not so sure about that. They still have plenty of talent. It's tough to replace Artemi Panarin, but I thought getting Gus Nyquist was a smart move, very prudent in the long term, where you at least got yourself a top to middle 6 winger. If I have to list them in order, I think the Islanders fall off a lot. So I would say Capitals, Hurricanes, Rangers, Penguins are my top 4.
Capitals, Hurricanes, Rangers.
I'll go all the way. Capitals.
Oh, wow.
Capitals, Hurricanes, Rangers, Penguins, Devils, Islanders, Flyers, Blue Jackets.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So you have the Blue Jackets finishing last?
I do, but I don't think they're going to be a bad last place team. Like, I think it'll be a situation where they are in the wild card hunt well into March. But
right.
they're all gonna beat up on each other. That's the thing, is that it's gonna take the eye test in order to actually assess these teams, because there will be a group of them. Like last year, the Devils finished with 72 points. They were an objectively bad team last year. I think whoever finishes last in this division, barring something totally unforeseen, will actually be a competitive squad. The only 2 teams, and seems stupid to say, the only 2 teams that I think are very, very bad in the East are going to be Detroit and Ottawa.
Yeah, I agree. And even Detroit is starting to go in the right direction, so they could be competitive, but it's not going to be good for them. All right, I have a similar top, I think. I already forget what you said, but I have Washington, Carolina, and Pittsburgh as the top 3 seeds in the Metro, and I have the Rangers getting the second wild card. Maybe I'm falling in love with what they did in the offseason and giving that too much credit, but
I won't shut up about them either.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it. There's probably some osmosis going on there, but like I said, not really high on Columbus. I haven't, maybe I'm sleeping on a team like Philly, but I think in terms of those top 3, it could be really any order with Washington, Carolina, and Pittsburgh. Again, it comes back to the talent on Washington is undeniable. I mean, they're still 1 year removed from winning the Stanley Cup. It's a really good team. Pittsburgh did the same thing. Top end talents there. Carolina has probably arguably the best defense core in the league, and we saw last year how far they can get a team.
Yeah,
So,
I'll be interested to see how Carolina looks. They obviously had depth there, otherwise they wouldn't have moved Justin Falk.
Right.
But without him, I'll be curious to see.
I think they're pretty confident what they have. I like Britain Moore too. I mean, that's a good outfit there.
Good outfit.
So that's that. And anything else on the Eastern Conference from you?
No, not
I
really.
think you ran down pretty much every team, so we're good.
I did, yeah. I was whipping through that. I was feeling good.
Central Division, the Western Conference. Who you got?
I think this is the equivalent of the Metro, where there are a
This
lot.
is just a
It's going to be a tough division, and I don't think the Blues are going to be nearly as good as
don't think
last
so,
year.
I almost had the Blues. I do have the Blues making the playoffs. I came very close to keeping them out.
So I would say the two wild card teams from the Metro or from the Central last year end up being the top two teams. I think Colorado ends up winning that division, and then Dallas. After that, it gets a little dicey for me. I'd say Colorado, Dallas, and then probably Winnipeg. I'm a little skeptical of if they'll be able to keep up the pace that they did last year. They finished with 99 points. But, I mean, there's still talent there. You can't totally dismiss them. Nashville, I think, won't fade as much as some people might assume that they will be, but I don't think they'll be the force that they have been. So, and then the only team that I would say you can probably mark off right out of the chute is Minnesota. I think we differ on that, but the Wild.
No, I just want them to be good because of Guerin.
They seem to be in a bit of limbo for me, or seem to be in a bit of limbo altogether. So, yeah, final answer, I'll do Colorado, Dallas, Winnipeg, St. Louis, Nashville, Chicago, Minnesota.
So you have Nashville, Chicago, and Minnesota missing the playoff?
Correct.
I have Nashville winning the division. So
is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think again,
I think they fade.
Who knows? Because it's so wide. If they miss the playoffs, it wouldn't totally shock me. If they go to the Western Conference Final, it wouldn't shock me.
That's the nature of the Central Division right now. I'd say that you could probably argue they're more complete than the Metro.
Yeah. So I like Nashville going out and getting Duchesne. They have some depth down the middle now. I like the goaltending situation there. Some good depth on the blue line. Again, maybe it's just survival of the fittest there, and I think they have the best chance of finding a way to survive that war zone that is the Central Division. I like Dallas a lot this year. I have them coming in second. I think that you look at the goalie combination. I thought it was interesting. ESPN did its rankings of each goaltending situation, and they had them third, I think, in the NHL, right with the Bruins, and kind of the parallels are there. And I get it with Ben Bishop and Anton Khudobin being one of the best combinations in the entire league. I like again, I'm big on the elite top forward talent. They have that.
Yeah.
And they have a pretty decent blue line as well. So I think Dallas is poised for a deep run.
I think you could make a case that Dallas has the best defense in the NHL.
Yeah, it's up there. And Winnipeg, Winnipeg looks like one of those ones we keep talking about them every year, and the window is going to close sooner than we realize.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where they're at. So this is kind of poop or get off the pot for the Jets this year. So we'll see. If they miss the playoffs, it wouldn't totally surprise me either. So
well, and to that end, if I may, I would say the big difference maker in the Central, and that could impact teams like Winnipeg, is if the Blackhawks get the same version as Robin Lehner as the Islanders did last year. Because if they do, I think Chicago's very much in the thick of the wild card conversation. They have enough talent up front, especially with the emergence of DeBrincat, where if they can get things shored up in the back, and if they can have a goaltending tandem, one of these two-man tandems that are as good as Dallas and Boston and whatnot have, I mean, they have the other components, I would argue. So, sorry.
Yeah, no. It's and I have my wild cards in the Western Conference, both from the Central. I got St. Louis and Colorado. I like Colorado.
Cool.
Pacific Division, what do you got?
I think Vegas is going to be very, very good.
Yes.
I'm skeptical of Calgary. I don't think this is an overly deep division. I think Anaheim, Edmonton, and LA are all a ways off. I think Vancouver's kind of the team to watch this year. Between Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser, there's enough young talent there. But I could see the same three teams making the postseason again. I'm still not convinced on the Coyotes, even though they got Phil Kessel. So I'll do Vegas, San Jose, Calgary, and then probably Vancouver, Arizona, Edmonton, Anaheim, and LA. But I think the top three teams in the Pacific will make in no wild cards.
Yeah, I got no wild cards, but I got Vegas, Calgary, and Arizona. I think.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I just the Arizona pick. I will be completely honest. I don't know a ton about Arizona. I know that they got Phil Kessel, which is I
Enough
guess a
for
good
you.
thing. Yeah, but it's more this one. I was looking at it as like I need to add some team that nobody else really has, or I need to play the odds here because it feels like we're probably too much chalk even as it is here with our predictions. So someone's going to come out of nowhere and get into this thing. And then, Arizona was good last, or not good, but they showed signs
they
of
weren't
progress.
that far off. And a notable offseason addition, Bruins legend Carl Soderberg, who they got from Colorado. I think that helps. He'll probably be their third line center, which he's one of the more serviceable middle six centers, or third line. I shouldn't say middle six, but third line centers. And there's talent there. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's still useful, exciting young man, and Clayton Keller as well.
Yep.
So there's talent there. I'm not sure I agree with you that they'll fight their way into the postseason, but
it's a free country.
It is. Yeah. No. Far be it from me to tell you what to think.
Do you have an Eastern Conference final prediction? Or not? I mean, I did it because I'm great, but if you did it, that's okay. Who do you think is going to win the Stanley Cup? Isn't that hard?
You know what? I'll go bold here. I think the Eastern Conference final will be played in Florida. I think it'll be Panthers Lightning.
Wow.
Yeah. I've said this multiple times, both on the podcast and now on the podcast, all in on Florida this year.
I have heard.
I think they're going to be a wagon.
Who wins that series?
Screw it. The Panthers do. I don't trust the Lightning enough.
Oh, God help us with the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup final. That would be wild. Real chalk for me. I got Tampa Bay over Toronto. I think this is the year Toronto finally gets through the Bruins with the way I have it shaking out. I have them playing in the first round yet again. I think they have enough firepower to get by the Bruins there, but then just run into a juggernaut in the Lightning. The Lightning can go one of two ways, right? Either they just are terrible and they don't live up to expectations, and it's clear that this thing has played a role in them falling apart. I think it goes the opposite direction. They use it as motivation. I think this is one of those stories where they get by that first round pretty easily, and they get that monkey off the back, and then it's smooth sailing to the Cup final from there. I think it's just save for an injury, they're so damn good that it's hard to see how they don't go on a deep run. So
I don't think we'll run into a situation again where they melt down the way they did against Columbus this year.
So, do you have a Western Conference pick?
Vegas is just so good, right?
Yeah.
So Vegas over, I don't know. Give me Vegas over Dallas.
I got Dallas over Vegas.
Okay.
So I have so you have Vegas
Vegas and Florida,
and I have Tampa Bay and Dallas.
All right.
No matter what, I'm going to add a new bold prediction for the NHL for me. The Stanley Cup final will be the least watched Stanley Cup final in NHL history.
If it's Panthers Vegas, I mean, people are excited by the Golden Knights, but as much as I like the Panthers, I feel like they're such a niche team that you probably can't get another, casual hockey fan jazzed about that.
Are there any things that you want to power rank? I know you mentioned this.
Not really.
No, I want to do one thing. I did a power ranking because we said we would do it, and you didn't do it, but I did it anyway.
I mean, I have one. I'm just.
What is your? All right.
I was going to say
the power ranking of the Panthers.
No, I should. My top 5 players in the NHL. All right.
All right, go.
Going a little bit different. So the top 2 you can't really argue with: Connor McDavid and Nikita Kucherov. Third, I would say, is Artemi Panarin. Fourth would be Sasha Barkov down in Florida. I have to get a Panther in there.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
And then 5, Nathan MacKinnon.
Yeah.
That's my top 5. I think for as valued as Artemi Panarin is, he's still grossly underrated. Outside of Pasternak, there's probably no one else better from the dot on the power play when it comes to one-timers. And MacKinnon, I think, is another. MacKinnon and Barkov are 2 other guys who don't get nearly enough due. So That's my top 5.
It's nuts.
Not as exciting as it should
I'm
have
not making
been.
the argument for them, but it's just crazy that we've gotten to the point without even realizing it. They're like Crosby and Ovechkin aren't part of these lists anymore. Without even thinking about it. It's just wild.
I feel like
for Noah.
sometimes they'll get included because they feel like pundits feel like they should be included. You'd be hard pressed to convince me that Sidney Crosby is still a top 5 player in the NHL, and that's not necessarily an indictment of him. Rather, the emergence of some other young stars.
There's a lot of good young talent in the NHL.
There is tons.
So I power ranked the teams I think most likely to pull a Blues this year.
Okay.
Teams that will. So this is a lot of things that you have to cross off here to be part of this list. I think you have to have relatively high expectations entering the season.
Just a colossal meltdown in the middle of the season.
Perhaps you're a team that has fallen short in the playoffs in past years. Maybe you have a long playoff drought. Maybe you have a good defense core. Maybe you have goaltending situations. And maybe you have a coach on the hot seat and you stumble out of the gates and you fire that coach and you turn around and you go on to glory.
There are a lot of boxes.
They are. But hey, I found a few that fit into some of the boxes. Number 1, the Winnipeg Jets.
Yep. Is Paul Maurice on the hot seat?
Yes, very much so, especially if they stumble, which maybe they will. And if they do, they should fire him and bring in somebody else and take them over. Some thug from the 90s Flyers to take them over and go nuts. So I think the Jets are, this is a team that we've been, like I said earlier, we've been talking about them for years, and they haven't really made that next step. So something's got to put them over the edge. San Jose Sharks, I think, are out there. I think there's a lot of similarities here. Pete DeBoer has been there for a while, hasn't really gotten the job done. They kind of ran into some issues last year, but I think they have a good D core, kind of like the Blues did last year. Mm-hmm. And it's Joe Thornton, not the Jay Bouwmeester of 2020.
Yeah,
it's the same.
What a
same thing.
Darling Jay Bouwmeester became.
But it's a guy who's been around forever. I mean, even longer, and hasn't won that Stanley Cup. So the Hurricanes I have in here, deep defense core, like they said, questionable goaltending situation.
Yeah, definitely questionable goaltending.
Maybe they grab somebody off the checkers and go nuts, a la Jordan Binnington. Who knows? Don't know. I don't know.
I'm so not sold on the Hurricanes this year. Like, I think they could get one of the division spots. I think I predicted as much, but
that falls right in with what we're doing here.
Right? No. Maybe I'm playing right into what you're looking for. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think Brind'Amour's Moore's on the hot seat.
No,
I think
they don't have to be.
I know, but I'm just saying with some of those comparisons there, I think with what he did last year and the surprise that Carolina was, he bought himself quite a bit of time to finagle with, failure.
And then I got the Blue Jackets. I don't know. They're kind of left for dead. That's a different situation, I suppose. Maybe they fire John Tortorella, and then everybody gets excited.
So I forget.
Goaltending's whatever.
I forget who wrote this or tweeted this, but it resonated so much that somebody put, a lot of people are counting the Blue Jackets out and are just dismissing the Blue Jackets. And what better coach to lead a team that's dismissed than John Tortorella? So I think he is a perfect fit for what this Blue Jackets team's
might be some value for Jack Adams if you're looking for a futures bet there, or they suck and they say screw this guy and they quit on him. Yeah,
another very realistic possibility. I mean, it's not like Torts is unfamiliar with getting canned.
Correct.
So,
and then finally have the Flyers. Long cup droughts. Let's go.
Really weird coaching staff now.
I don't know. I just ran out and I was like, the Flyers, whatever.
Just throw a team in.
All right. Anything else before we get to the real discussion that I want to get into?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, let's do the hockey. The Bruins are going to have a third jersey this season at some point. I think it was Ty Anderson who tracked this down.
From Neely.
Yeah, and so Cam Neely's confirmed it. It will not be the Pooh Bear. I think a lot of the speculation on the Twitter sphere was that maybe it'll kind of look like the Winter Classic jersey, but perhaps in black.
Yeah.
Kind of a throwback to they wore these in the early 90s as well, during I think the 75th anniversary or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Maybe something like that. What would you like to see the Bruins do for a third jersey? Do you have any thoughts?
I don't have a strong opinion on it. I do like what they did for the Winter Classic in, 2016? Yeah, 2016.
Yeah, against the Canadiens.
Against the Canadians. Now I have to find an image to try and articulate it. The black with the bear, the small bear in the center. You've got both Boston and Bruins.
Sure.
I like that. So, yeah, that would have to be my vote. I don't really have a particularly strong opinion on it.
Well, luckily I do. I am with Patrice Bergeron. I think it was Ty Anderson who also talked to Patrice Bergeron about jerseys, and Bergeron said they should go back to the early 90s Bruins jersey, which I would be all about. Give me the Cam Neely, Adam Oates, Ray Bork look with just the regular old spoked B in the middle and the meth-addicted bear on the shoulder. That would be great. I'm all in for that.
You're all in on the meth bear. See,
if
we're going to get nuts, why don't we go all the way back to the 1928 jersey, which is essentially the 2016 Winter Classic one in terms of the logo, but it's got that awful like mustard yellow and brown stripes.
I hate that.
It's such a hideous jersey.
I hate that. Like, I did not like, even though one of my buddies has one of those hats. It's like white with brown. Like, brown is not. I don't like the color brown. And I especially don't like it with the color yellow. It's a tough look.
Yeah.
Brown
I don't know what they were thinking back in the 20s.
Did color even exist in the 20s? Everything's in black and white anyway, so I don't know. Also, what do you think of the Pooh Bear? Would you want them to go back to that? I think it'd be funny if they did it for one game.
Well, see, I think my problem is that all of a sudden it becomes just like a caricature of itself, right? It's like, we went back to the Pooh Bear. Like,
there's that thing with like uniform Twitter where everybody just thinks like ironically or is maybe not even, maybe it's unironically, like anything that happened in the 90s was better than anything now.
Yeah.
Which isn't always the case, and I think that's a glaring example of that. So, yeah. All right. I like jersey talk, so I'm feeling good. I'm feeling excited now. I look forward to seeing the third jersey. I think that's probably the most exciting thing that will happen in the first half of the Bruins season because, as I said, early season hockey can be a bit of a chore sometimes.
Yeah.
But hey, if you're going to do the chores, make sure you watch it on NESN. I'm looking forward to having hockey back in our lives.
Yes,
it is.
Likewise.
At the very least, it's something to watch, something to do, and it unfortunately is a sign that the impending doom that is winter is nearing. But that's something we just have to take hand in hand.
Yeah,
accept our fate.
You have to take the good with the bad. That's life, right?
Yes. So that's all I have. Do you have anything else, Logan?
No, I don't think I do. Welcome back, Mike.
It's good to be back. We will try to convene a little more regularly than we did last year.
Yeah,
which
at least
could make for pulling teeth with me. And God bless you for the role you take in our podcast, carrying the load, because
it would not happen without me.
I just can't imagine us. I mean, we will meet soon, but discuss.
Our desks are right next to each other.
To discuss the Bruins. What did they begin? Was it 4 games?
Yeah, 4 games.
4 games out against Western Conference teams that I really don't care about. Although opening
against the Stars is your Coyotes, the second game of the season.
That's tough. It's a tough break for the Bruins. A tough break for everybody around here. It's just, I don't know. I guess it's good to get those out of the way early on when nobody's really paying attention. But
I'm going to get out in front of this. I plan on watching just an insane number of Panthers and Rangers games this year. I think they're going. Both of them are going to be an absolute delight to watch.
All right, and with that, we will leave. That'll be the final thought from today's NESN Bruins podcast season preview. Enjoy the hockey, everyone. Be sure to tune into NESN all season long for the best coverage of one of the best hockey teams in the business. So look forward to speaking with you soon, Logan, and look forward to being in the ear holes of all of our faithful listeners for the rest of the season.